If there's one thing that grabs attention these days, it's seeing something bold like, most seniors never hear this, plastered across a screen because let's be real, headlines like that hit you with a mix of curiosity and a tiny bit of attitude, and they make you pause just long enough to wonder what kind of truth bomb is coming next. It's that quick moment where your brain goes, all right, what exactly haven't I heard? What's the big mystery this time? And honestly, we've all been there, whether we're scrolling late at night or just zoning out between errands, spotting some loud, oversized text that promises some life-changing secret like it's about to drop the wisdom of the century. So let me grab you for about 30 seconds here and actually give you something real. Because the thing I'm talking about isn't some gimmick or clickbait trick. It's something that genuinely hits home for everybody, no matter what age bracket you're in. Though older adults tend to appreciate it in a deeper, more grounded way because they've lived enough life to know when someone's trying to sugarcoat something versus when someone's laying it out clean and honest. The truth is, people don't slow down enough to actually talk straight anymore. Everyone's trying to be politically correct or overly careful, or they're worried about sounding too direct, and in all that tiptoeing, the stuff that really needs to be said gets lost. Seniors, older adults, whatever label you want to use, have this built-in radar for authenticity, because after decades of dealing with people, situations, ups, downs, heartbreaks, surprises, victories, and everything in between, they've learned to sniff out nonsense from a mile away, and they can tell instantly when someone's finally speaking from a real place. And the funny part is, the truth I'm talking about isn't some deep, complicated philosophical puzzle. It's something simple, something everybody knows but barely anyone says out loud. That life doesn't magically slow down just because you hit a certain age, and you don't suddenly lose your purpose, your spark, or your worth. If anything, you gain clarity, that kind of sharp, no-nonsense wisdom that only comes from surviving everything life tossed at you, and you start realizing that you don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace, choosing joy, choosing yourself. Older adults appreciate hearing this truth because society often acts like they fade into the background, like they're supposed to sit quietly on the sidelines, but in reality they're still living, still learning, still growing, still craving connection, humor, love, meaning, and all the tiny, priceless things that make being human actually worthwhile. And the crazy part is that most people don't even realize how insulting it is to treat aging like some kind of expiration date for personality or passion. The world tends to act like once you hit a certain age, you're meant to shrink yourself, like you're supposed to step aside and let everything just pass you by. But older adults know better than anyone that life doesn't owe you anything, which is exactly why they keep squeezing meaning out of every moment they get. They've put in the years, the work, the struggle, the growth, and they've got every right to exist loudly and boldly, even if society wants to box them into the role of quiet observer. What nobody says out loud enough is that getting older doesn't make you irrelevant. If anything, it sharpens you, strips away all the fake stuff you used to stress over, and makes you laser-focused on what's actually worth your energy. When you're younger, you spend so much time trying to impress people, compete, live up to expectations, and keep up with trends, but once you've lived enough life, you start realizing how pointless most of that noise really is. Older adults aren't tired. They're just done wasting time on things that don't feed their soul. They're done pretending, done trying to fit in, done worrying about who approves of them, and that freedom is something younger people don't even know they should envy. You start understanding who genuinely loves you, who drains you, what keeps you grounded, and what sparks joy in a way that feels real, not performative. Older adults still want to laugh until their stomach hurts. Still want good food, deep conversations, warm hugs, road trips, inside jokes, hobbies that make them lose track of time, and moments that remind them they're still here, still breathing, still part of the world. They want connection that isn't shallow, love that isn't complicated, honesty that isn't sugar-coated, and interactions that don't feel rushed or transactional. And yet people act like aging is some slow fade-out when in reality, it's more like the moment the lights finally come on and everything becomes clearer. Older adults carry stories, wisdom, mistakes, victories, heartbreaks, and history that younger generations couldn't even begin to understand without actually sitting down and listening. Because you don't get that kind of depth from TikTok clips or motivational quotes. You get it from years of living, grinding, loving, losing, trying, failing, rebuilding, and figuring out how to keep going anyway. They've lived through enough storms to know their own strength in a way that doesn't need showing off. And they've tasted enough joy to recognize that life, even with all its messiness, is still packed with things worth waking up for, things worth laughing about, things worth fighting for. And that's the part that society keeps glossing over, because everyone's so obsessed with youth that they forget. The real magic comes later, when you've seen enough of the world to understand what truly matters and what was just noise the whole time. Getting older doesn't make you less. It makes you more aware, more intentional, more honest, more grounded, more unapologetically human, because you stop performing for people who never mattered and start living for yourself in a way that feels pure, real, and deeply satisfying. Older adults don't need validation from strangers or approval from trends. They've survived too much to care about that. They walk with a kind of quiet confidence that only comes from knowing you've been knocked down before and still got back up. From knowing you've loved hard and lost hard and kept your heart open anyway. From knowing that even when life felt like it was falling apart, you found a way to stitch it back together. And the world seriously underestimates that kind of strength. Younger people see wrinkles or gray hair and think old, but they don't understand that every line on an older person's face is basically a trophy, a record of everything they've endured, everything they've learned, everything they've overcome. Older adults know how to appreciate the simple stuff because they know how fast it all goes. They know the value of a slow morning, a long conversation, a shared meal, a familiar song, a warm hand to hold, peace that isn't forced, and love that doesn't need to be loud to be real. They know that joy doesn't have to look like fireworks. Sometimes it's just sitting on a porch with someone who truly gets you, talking about nothing and everything at the same time, or laughing over memories that still feel alive decades later, the kind of moments that hit you right in the heart because they remind you of who you were and who you've become. And honestly, that's the kind of quiet happiness younger people don't always appreciate yet, because they're busy chasing the next big thing, the next shiny moment, the next reason to post something online, while older adults have figured out that the real magic is always in the small stuff, the warm cup of coffee, the familiar voice, the inside joke, the slow morning that doesn't demand anything from you except being present. And the truth that deserves to be said way more often is this: older adults aren't fading out, they're leveling up in ways younger people don't even see yet. They've got layers, depth, clarity, and perspective that make life richer, not smaller. They've lived through enough highs and lows to understand that the things that used to feel like a big deal really don't matter. In the long run, they're not becoming irrelevant. They're becoming refined, like everything rough has been sanded down, and what's left is the real, solid core of who they are. They're not diminishing. They're becoming distilled into the purest, most genuine version of themselves. And that's something younger generations could learn from if they'd slow down long enough to notice. Older adults have this way of moving through the world that's calm but powerful, like they're carrying an entire library of experiences inside them. And every story, every scar, every victory, every loss has shaped them into someone who sees life with a depth that only comes from time. And instead of rushing, instead of chasing validation, instead of trying to be everything for everyone, they've learned to value the things that actually matter: peace, loyalty, honesty, laughter, good food, real conversations, people who show up, and moments that feel real instead of staged. They know the beauty of letting go, the comfort of acceptance, the strength of resilience, and the peace that comes with not needing to prove anything to anyone. And if the world paid half as much attention to their wisdom as it does to the latest trend or viral moment, we'd probably understand life a whole lot better, because older adults already figured out most of the things younger people are still stressing over, still losing sleep over, still overthinking like it's their full-time job. They learned how to survive heartbreak, not the cute movie kind, but the kind that shatters you and forces you to rebuild piece by piece. They learned how to bounce back after loss, after plans fell apart, after people they loved walked away or passed on, after chapters ended before they were ready. They learned how to forgive themselves even when it took years, even when they didn't think they deserved it at first. They learned how to protect their energy, how to walk away from drama, how to say no without explaining themselves, how to spot fake people from a mile away, and how to choose peace over chaos every single time. And they learned how to love without fear, not because they never got hurt, but because they realized that holding back doesn't save you from anything. It just keeps you from the good stuff. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. They kept moving, even when life tried to knock them flat, even when everything felt heavy, even when starting over felt impossible. They kept getting up because they knew that the only thing worse than falling is choosing not to rise again. That's why older adults walk around with this quiet strength that younger people don't always understand. It's not arrogance, it's experience. It's earned. It's built from years of taking hits and learning how to stand taller after each one. They're living proof that getting older isn't about fading away. It's about growing into someone wiser, steadier, braver, more grounded, and more beautifully human than you ever were before. When you're young, you think confidence comes from knowing everything. But older adults know the real power comes from accepting that you don't have to know it all to live well. They embrace the mess, the mystery, the imperfections, the slow days, the quiet victories. They know how to appreciate a sunset, a familiar song, a warm hug, a good meal, or a moment of laughter that catches you off guard. They don't rush through life the way younger generations do because they've realized that half the beauty is in the pauses, the stillness, the moments you can't post but you'll remember forever. They've learned that joy isn't loud, it's steady, it's that soft, warm feeling that sneaks up on you in the middle of an ordinary moment, like sipping a cup of coffee in peace or hearing someone you love laugh from across the room. And older adults know that better than anyone because they've lived long enough to understand that the big, flashy moments aren't what carry you through life. It's the quiet ones, the simple ones, the ones that don't need an audience. Love isn't perfect, it's patient, it's forgiving, it's messy, it's stubborn, it's choosing to stick around even when things aren't easy. And older adults get that on a deeper level because they've seen how relationships transform over the years, how people grow, how misunderstandings happen, how healing takes time, and how real love isn't about perfection. It's about staying, trying, listening, and showing up again and again. Strength isn't showy. It's quiet and persistent and built over time. The kind of strength that doesn't need to brag because it's rooted in every trial survived, every setback overcome, every heartbreak healed, every challenge faced with more grit than anyone saw on the outside. And if everyone paid just a little more attention to the people who've lived long enough to truly understand all this, maybe we'd stop chasing things that don't matter, like fake validation, temporary applause, shallow approval, and start cherishing the things that actually make life feel full. Things like peace, loyalty, honesty, good company, shared laughter, and moments that make you feel human in the best way. Older adults aren't fading, they're glowing in this deeper, quieter way that comes from a lifetime of showing up even when it was hard, even when things didn't go as planned, even when life felt overwhelming. They've loved deeply, lost deeply, healed slowly, grown steadily, and through all of it, they've uncovered the version of themselves that's real, raw, and beautifully unfiltered. They don't need to pretend or compete or rush anymore because they've already lived enough life to know what matters and what was just noise all along. There's a calm power in them, a softness mixed with strength, a kind of wisdom that hits different because it's not theoretical. It's lived, felt, earned. They've learned how to slow down without feeling like they're falling behind, how to breathe a little deeper, and move through life without that constant pressure to prove something. Because after enough years and enough ups and downs, older adults finally understand that rushing doesn't get you anywhere worth being. And half the beauty of life is in the pauses we used to skip right over. They've learned how to appreciate the moment they're in without wanting to be somewhere else, without that restless itch to chase the next big thing, because they know now that the present, this tiny, ordinary slice of time, is where the real memories are made, the ones you end up holding on to decades later. They've learned how to love without keeping score, without playing games, without expecting perfection, because they've seen how fragile people are, how messy relationships can get, and how powerful forgiveness becomes when you choose connection over pride. Their love is softer but stronger, quieter but steadier, and rooted in experience rather than fear, because they know that holding on to resentment only weighs you down. while letting someone be human, imperfect but sincere, makes relationships last in a way that's real, not performative. They've learned how to let go without bitterness, how to release the past without dragging its weight behind them, how to accept that not everything or everyone is meant to stay forever, and that losing people doesn't always mean losing yourself. That kind of acceptance doesn't come easy, but older adults have mastered it through years of heartbreaks that taught them when to fight and when to walk away, and through years of healing that taught them that peace is worth more than winning an argument or proving a point. And they've learned how to find joy in places younger people often overlook: the quiet morning light, the sound of rain, the comfort of routine, the taste of a home-cooked meal, the familiar smell of a loved one's sweater, the calm of sitting in silence with someone who understands you, the beauty of a simple day that went smoothly. They've learned that joy doesn't always come wrapped in excitement or noise. Sometimes it's the small, steady moments that end up meaning the most. They've realized that some things simply aren't worth fighting for, like ego, drama, old grudges, fake friendships, pointless arguments, or anything that drains more than it gives. They've lived long enough to recognize emotional clutter and cut it out without hesitation, because when you've been through enough chapters, you stop entertaining anything that drains your spirit or complicates your peace for no good reason. Older adults don't waste time on pettiness, jealousy, fake friends, forced conversations, or anything that feels heavy in all the wrong ways. They've learned the hard way that life is way too short to hang on to things that leave you feeling empty, and they're quick to walk away from situations that disturb their inner calm. And they've learned that other things are worth everything, like peace, loyalty, health, genuine connection, family, trusted friends, time well spent, laughter that comes from deep in the chest, and love that feels like home. These are the things they protect fiercely, the things they show up for again and again, the things they pour their heart and energy into because they know these are the treasures that stand the test of time. They invest in people who are real, conversations that are honest, moments that feel meaningful, and memories that stick with you long after the moment is gone. They understand that peace is priceless, that loyalty is rare, and that the feeling of being surrounded by people who love you for exactly who you are is something you never take for granted. And laughter, the real kind, the kind that shakes your shoulders and makes your eyes water, that becomes one of the purest joys in life, not something to rush past or overlook. They've lived long enough to know that love doesn't have to be flashy or dramatic. Sometimes it's just someone remembering your favorite snack, calling to check in, or sitting beside you without needing to fill the silence. Those small moments of love and connection are worth more than all the noise the world tries to sell. Older adults carry this quiet wisdom that younger generations haven't grown into yet: the ability to know what to hold tight and what to let go of, to recognize what feeds the soul and what starves it, and to choose the difference with grace, clarity, and a heart that's lived enough to understand what really matters. They know how to walk away without anger, how to forgive without reopening the door, how to care deeply without losing themselves, and how to stay grounded even when life gets messy. They've learned the value of slowing down, the beauty of small routines, the warmth of familiar faces, and the strength of soft, steady resilience that doesn't need applause to be real. Older adults understand that life isn't about rushing from one thing to the next, but about savoring the little moments that younger people often overlook while they're busy trying to keep up with everything and everyone. They know the comfort of waking up to the same cozy rituals every morning: the familiar mug, the quiet kitchen, the first sip of coffee that hits just right, the rhythm of a day that doesn't demand they sprint to some imaginary finish line. They've figured out that happiness doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as seeing someone you love walk through the door, hearing a voice that instantly makes your heart settle, or getting a hug that reminds you you're not alone in this world. And they absolutely understand the power of resilience, the kind that doesn't scream or posture, but shows up again and again, softer each time but stronger too, built not from perfection but from every mistake, heartbreak, and lesson they had to absorb along the way. Their wisdom isn't loud or showy. It's gentle, steady, and carved into them by years of living, loving, hurting, healing, and growing in ways younger generations can't fully grasp yet. They've lived through seasons where everything felt upside down, and they somehow found a way to steady themselves and keep walking. They've experienced the kind of pain that changes you and the kind of joy that makes everything worth it. And somewhere along the way, they learned how to blend both into something balanced and beautiful. Younger generations might not always see it, yet they might mistake softness for weakness, silence for boredom, slowness for irrelevance. But one day they'll understand why older adults move the way they do. They'll understand why they choose peace over arguments that lead nowhere, why they love deeper even after getting hurt, why they let go quicker instead of clinging to things that only drain them, and why they protect the things that truly matter with everything they've got. They'll understand why older adults don't react to every little problem like it's the end of the world, why they don't chase trends, why they don't stress over what strangers think, and why they're not afraid to say no without a long explanation. They've already lived through too much to waste energy on things that don't feed their soul. They've learned what deserves their attention and what doesn't, what adds value and what only adds noise, who shows up and who disappears when life gets real. And that clarity, that deep, lived-in understanding of what life is actually about is something younger people will come to appreciate once they've lived enough years to earn it themselves. Older adults aren't slow, they're intentional. They aren't checked out, they're selective. They aren't fading, they're focusing. And every choice they make comes from a place of wisdom built over a lifetime of getting back up, loving harder, letting go gracefully, and holding on to what truly makes life worth living. And in that understanding, they find a clarity people spend their whole lives searching for. If the world valued that kind of wisdom even half as much as it values trends and noise, maybe more people would learn how to live instead of just rushing through life. Older adults aren't disappearing. They're becoming more themselves than ever, glowing with a kind of truth, tenderness and resilience that only comes from a lifetime of being brave enough to keep going. So yeah, maybe a headline like, "Most seniors never hear this," grabs your attention. But the real message, the one that actually matters, is that seniors shouldn't have to wait for some flashy line on a screen to hear the truth they already deserve to know every single day. Picture yourself opening the pantry, staring at a shelf full of snacks, canned goods, fruits, treats, old favorites, and new temptations, and realizing half the stuff you pick up is out of habit more than actual choice. Then picture those days when someone says something like, "When levels get too high," whether they're talking about stress, energy dips, sugar rushes, sodium overload, or just the day getting a little too chaotic. And suddenly, you're standing there thinking about all the foods to choose and foods to avoid, not because someone scared you into it, but because you're finally interested in understanding how food can affect the way you feel, physically, mentally, emotionally, and even socially. That moment, the moment where food stops being random and starts being intentional, is the part most people, especially seniors, never hear explained in a real, human, everyday way. The truth is, most older adults were raised in a completely different food world than the one we're living in now. Back then, food was simpler. Ingredients were shorter. Meals were homemade. And people didn't talk about superfoods, macros, ultra-processeds, or any of the buzzwords plastered all over grocery stores and TikTok today. So the whole idea of foods to choose and foods to avoid can feel like a modern maze no one bothered to hand them a map for. And it's not because seniors can't understand it, in fact. They often understand it better than younger people once. Someone actually explains it in a grounded, no-nonsense way. It's because no one ever slows down long enough to talk about how food influences our day-to-day quality of life beyond the dramatic headlines. People jump straight to alarm bells like, "Your levels are too high," without explaining that many kinds of levels exist: energy levels, hydration levels, stress levels, mood levels, and even satisfaction levels when it comes to how nourished or sluggish you feel. And here's the real kicker. Food affects all of those, not just the ones people usually warn you about. The problem is, folks think healthy eating is either an all-or-nothing deal. They think it means cutting out everything they love, eating only bland stuff, or following some strict plan that feels more like punishment than nourishment. But in reality, eating smart isn't about deprivation, it's about awareness. It's about noticing how your body reacts, what foods leave you feeling full and steady versus worn out and cranky, and which habits actually support the life you're trying to live. And when you've lived long enough to know that feeling good matters more than chasing trends, You start paying attention to things young people completely overlook. Older adults know that food has rhythm. It affects sleep, energy, clarity, digestion, mood, and the older you get, the more you feel each shift. That's why understanding choices isn't about fear. It's about empowerment. A lot of seniors never hear that the body doesn't just want food, it wants balance. When levels get too high again, whatever kind of levels we're talking about, the body sends signals. Sometimes it nudges you gently, like feeling puffy after too much salty food. Sometimes it taps you on the shoulder, reminding you that heavy meals at the wrong time can leave you dragging for hours. And sometimes it hits you with that, ugh, I shouldn't have eaten that. Feeling that sticks around longer than it used to. These aren't punishments, they're messages. And learning to interpret those messages is one of the most underrated skills adults pick up later in life. Younger people bulldoze through those signals and pretend they don't feel them. But seniors can read those internal messages like weather forecasts. They know when something's off. They know when something needs adjusting. They just don't always get the guidance they deserve. The whole idea of foods to choose and foods to avoid gets thrown around so casually in the media that people forget it's not about morality. Food isn't good or bad, right or wrong. It's not about guilt or perfection. It's about identifying patterns that support your body instead of working against it. For example, some foods give you quick energy but leave you crashing an hour later. Some foods keep you steady and satisfied for hours without even trying. Some foods make your digestion smooth and easy. Others make you feel like you swallowed a bowling ball. Some foods calm your system, and others rev it up like a car engine. When levels get too high, stress, sodium intake, emotional overwhelm, anything reaching for certain foods can either soothe your system or add fuel to the fire. But here's the part most seniors never hear. Your food choices don't have to be dramatic or extreme to make a difference. You don't need a complete diet overhaul or some trendy restrictive plan. You just need awareness, mindfulness, small swaps, tiny shifts that build up over time. Most older adults have been making meals their whole lives, so adjusting how they choose food is more about tuning into their own experience than following some complicated method. It's more intuitive than people think. Your body already knows what feels good. It's the noise of labels, ads, diet culture, and conflicting information that makes things confusing. People also underestimate how much joy and comfort food brings. Especially to seniors, eating isn't just fuel, it's connection, family, tradition, nostalgia, and sensory pleasure. Food carries memories, holiday meals, Sunday dinners, garden harvests, favorite treats from childhood. So when talking about foods to choose or avoid, it's never about cutting out joy. It's about learning how to incorporate joy in a way that supports your well-being instead of draining it. Seniors often get talked down to about food, as if they don't know how to make decisions. But the truth is, many seniors are far more skilled at listening to their bodies than younger generations, who are constantly distracted by marketing and trends. There's also this thing people never talk about. As you get older, your taste buds change, your appetite changes, your cravings change. What used to satisfy you may not hit the same. Foods that felt heavy when you were young might weigh you down even more as you get older. Lighter meals might feel better. Smaller portions might be more comfortable. Fresh flavors might become more appealing. And sometimes, foods you ignored for decades suddenly become interesting or comforting. Bodies evolve and food preferences evolve with them. That's why understanding foods to choose or avoid isn't static, it's fluid. Based on how you feel today, this week, this season of life. And let's talk about energy levels, because that's another level people rarely explain. Seniors know that when energy levels dip too low, everything feels harder moving, thinking, even socializing. And when levels get too high, overstimulation, too much sugar, too much caffeine, it's just as uncomfortable. Food plays a huge role in regulating that middle ground. Simple, steady, nourishing choices help keep energy even. Heavy, chaotic, or sugary choices can make energy swing up and down. Again, not in a scary medical sense, just in the very human, everyday sense of how we feel throughout the day. Seniors deserve to hear that their body isn't malfunctioning. It's communicating. The emotional side of eating is another thing most seniors never hear this about. People assume seniors have everything figured out emotionally, but that's not how humanity works. Everyone eats emotionally sometimes. Everyone craves comfort. Everyone snacks out of boredom, loneliness, or nostalgia now and then. There's nothing wrong with it. The key is knowing why you're reaching for something and deciding whether that choice supports you in that moment. Food is emotional. Pretending it's not only makes things harder. Experts often acknowledge that emotional eating isn't a problem, it's information. It's telling you something about what you're feeling. Seniors often pick up on this faster than younger adults because they've lived long enough to recognize patterns, but they're rarely given the language or encouragement to trust their instincts. Another thing that doesn't get talked about enough is how food impacts mood. When levels get too high, stress levels, irritability levels, or even the level of "I've had enough of today," certain types of meals can make you feel heavier emotionally, while others make you feel lighter. Not because they're magical, but because digestion and mood are connected through comfort, satisfaction, and physical ease. Seniors often notice these shifts more clearly, but no one ever validates their observations, so they assume it's just aging, when really, it's just the body asking for a different kind of support. Community plays a role too. Meals change when you get older. Eating alone feels different from eating with family or friends. Cooking for one is different from cooking for many. And the choices you make often depend on convenience, motivation, and social connection. Seniors aren't told often enough that it's okay for their eating style to shift, along with their lifestyle. They're not failing because they want simpler meals. They're not doing anything wrong because their appetite is smaller or their preferences have changed. They're just evolving. The most forgotten truth is this: food is one of the few areas of life where older adults have full control. You can choose what you enjoy. You can choose what makes you feel good. You can choose when and how you eat. You can choose what serves you physically and emotionally, and you don't need trends, fads, or strict rules to guide you, just awareness, curiosity, and the willingness to make adjustments when your body asks for them. Nobody needs a strict list of foods to choose and foods to avoid, because every person is different. But what everyone does need, especially seniors, is the understanding that their relationship with food doesn't have to be intimidating, restrictive, or confusing. It can be an act of self-care, personal expression, comfort, and wellness rolled into one. Food isn't the enemy. Food isn't a threat. Food is a tool, a pleasure, and a form of nourishment that adapts with you at every stage of life. So if someone flashes a headline saying, "Most seniors never hear this," don't expect a scary secret. Expect a reminder that you deserve to feel good, that your choices matter, that your body is wise, and that you're allowed to shape your eating habits around your lifestyle, your preferences, your emotions, and your well-being. When levels get too high, whatever levels those may be, food can be part of your support system. And as you grow older, it becomes less about perfection and more about understanding yourself. That's the truth nobody says out loud nearly enough.